or grandmother got. It requires a different set of skills and requires additional training. And so as part of our strategy, we have to really focus on how do we ensure that young people and people entering in the manufacturing sector have the skills necessary to compete successfully with the, of course.
And that's a critical point. We have legislative fixes and we have strategies down here, but much of this is cultural. As you said, these facilities are not your grandparents' manufacturing facilities. And in Youngstown and Akron and in Rhode Island, we remember growing up and hearing about that long legacy of the steel mills blowing out soot. You've got to sweep your porch off 2 or 3 times during the course of a day because of the soot that's coming out, and the mill was running, and people said, well, that means we're working. You know, it's gold dust, really. Today it's much different. You can eat your breakfast off the floor in some of these facilities. And so how do we break with guidance counselors and, my estimation, robotics in the schools, Legos in the early schools, you know, begin this pipeline to get people excited about using their hands and making things again. And not everyone's going to go to college and get a 4-year degree.
Yeah, I think you raise a very important point, and one of the things I think we have seen, unfortunately, is the way that we have approached manufacturing in this country for the last couple of decades, where we've actually sent messages to young people that they should think of something other than manufacturing, that it's sort of a dead-end career, and manufacturing it doesn't exist here anymore. We're going to be a service economy. And you hear it in the language that guidance counselors and sometimes parents, I would say that if kids came home and said, Mom, Dad, I want to be a manufacturer, there are many parents who would say, oh, really? You know, that doesn't have a bright future. And I think what we have to really do is support both, you know, in career and technical academies, manufacturing tracks, to be sure that people see this as a career path, to remind people that manufacturing jobs pay on average above non-manufacturing jobs. So these are good paying jobs, and that it requires a different skill set today, a more advanced skill set, but that, you know, when you look particularly what's happening with innovation and design and 3D printing and all the intersections of making things with this new technology, it's a career path that has tremendous opportunities. But I agree with you very much that, you know, we have to stop saying to young people, your life is only a success if you go to college. That when I was a mayor of Providence, I used to visit schools all the time, and very often hear principals or teachers say, a 4th grade class, everyone's going to go to college, right? And encourage everyone to raise their hands. And the truth is, we have to send a message to young people. If you want to go to college and you're interested in that, great, and we want to be sure you have all the tools to be successful. But that you can have a fulfilling, successful, wonderful life where you can support yourself and your family in other careers, in like advanced manufacturing, and recognize that that's a valuable, important, valued part of our economy. And I think a lot of language around that and a lot of support so that people see that as a career path is important.
And I think that, you know, a lot of the jobs people have today, you know, you're tied to a BlackBerry after 5 or 6 o'clock, or an iPhone on the weekends. A lot of these manufacturing jobs that, you know, you put a good hard day's work in, you go home.
Right.
You know, you go home and you get the grill going, you go to your kid's Little League game, you go watch the Browns, you know, you do whatever it is you got to do, or Patriots or whoever you're rooting for.
Of course.
Yeah, you have time to have time to do other important things and be with your family and other things. And I remember looking back in the heyday in Youngstown, Niles, where I grew up, my grandfather had, you know, a great job, was well paid in the steel mill, and at 3 or 4 o'clock he was done, and he would go to his garden. They would have time to make a dinner, you know, a happy hour where the families would come together and be together and have that quality of life. And I think if we look at manufacturing and say, well, hey, it's clean, it's a new skill set, it's exciting, there's a lot of really hot things going on in manufacturing today. You can work in a team, you're creating new products in all different sectors of the economy, and you have a life outside of your work that is important for your family, your children, and your kids, and everything else.
Yeah, and you're making things that are sought by the rest of the world. I mean, I think one of the things we should never lose sight of is, you know, those words, made in America, still mean a lot all over the world. People understand that when a product is made in America, it's made by the best trained workers in the world, it has the best quality standards in the world, and so people all over the world want to buy stuff made in America. And so I think given the opportunity to do that, and certainly I think all Americans want to do that, so given that opportunity, we will see tremendous growth in our manufacturing sector. But I think it's very important that in this moment that we understand the significance of changing some of the policies in Washington that undermine American manufacturing. And I want to just take a minute to applaud the President, who has really made the rebirth of American manufacturing an important priority. He talks about it a lot in his State of the Union, I know, in address to the country, and he established recently this Investing in Manufacturing Communities Partnership program, really to help strengthen manufacturing, to help states develop, regional manufacturing strategies. I'm particularly proud that Rhode Island received one of the first grants in the first phase of this program that will really allow us to develop a strategy that will help to support and strengthen Rhode Island manufacturing, and obviously recognize what that will mean for job growth. But it's been I think, very valuable to have the President take a leadership role and continue to make the case that manufacturing and making things and rebuilding American manufacturing is a key part of our economic recovery. And it's one of those issues where one would hope that there's bipartisan support. You have been a great leader of the Manufacturing Caucus with a bipartisan leadership there. And, you look at the Make It in America agenda and you think, why haven't every single bill on that agenda already become law? I mean, these are good common sense bills that support American manufacturing, which is so critical to our country. And, we're in a difficult period now where there's not a lot of bipartisan support, but I'd love to hear the gentleman's thoughts on that, because it seems so critical.
I agree, and the issue really is we need to get on the stick, because China, the European Union, many other countries are pumping a good deal of money into 3D printing. We have one set up. Now the President wants to do additional 7 to 10 or 20, maybe 30 additional centers where you have these public-private partnerships where you're innovating in areas of the economy. We have the first in additive manufacturing. You have one of the first grants to start developing in Rhode Island. The Chinese are dumping tons of money in the 3D printing. They're going to have 10 innovation centers in China. So, I mean, they're full speed ahead. And this is an area that we want to win. We want to make sure that we are on the cutting edge, not just because we're Americans, but because our success is the world's success. And I think making these investments is critical, and it really isn't that much money. In the grand scheme of things, putting hundreds of millions of dollars into these critical areas of the economy. You look at three-dimensional printing, where for people listening who may not know, it's a printer in essence, and like the printer you would have on your desk, except you pump materials into the printer and it can print your iPhone, it could print a shoe. They have YouTube videos of houses being printed one day. And it's just amazing how this is going to revolutionize manufacturing and bring, we used to have the big mainframe computers that became desktops, so we have manufacturing today that fills rooms that could also be shrunk in parts, and it has a transformational effect to have a desktop manufacturing unit that every American could utilize. And the kind of innovation that's going to come from this, the kind of decentralization, streamlining, efficiencies in the supply chain, all of these things that can revolutionize our country. Look at what the Internet has done for wealth creation, but this is the kind of wealth creation that hits people in Rhode Island, hits people in Youngstown and Akron, Ohio. It's not just Silicon Valley. They benefit, manufacture it somewhere else. No one else really benefits from it other than the product, which is a significant benefit. This, I think, can be very revolutionary in that regard. So we've got an obligation here, seeing the tea leaves, reading the tea leaves, we got to make those investments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think first and foremost, I want to congratulate you again, because you have led the country in the Manufacturing Center, being the very first one, and I'm hoping we're going to take a group from Rhode Island soon to visit so we can see the success of what you've done and the kind of model it can provide for the whole country. But I think you're absolutely right. I think 3D printing is just one example that is really going to transform the way we make things in this country. And we have some great partners in Rhode Island, the Rhode Island School of Design, where I think we're going to really begin to understand that design is going to be such an important part of this new manufacturing. And it's going to make really everyone a manufacturer in some ways, to have the ability to print products. And so you're right, our competitors around the world also know this, and they're making very substantial investments. So I think this is one of those moments in the history of our country where we have to realize that if we're going to continue to lead the world economically and continue to be a place where products are produced that are the envy of the world, we have to create conditions that help companies and individuals innovate, to be successful in making things so that we can start shipping American-made goods all over the world, not American jobs.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things I think we have to look at is how do we support American manufacturers in tax policy so that we're not incentivizing companies that ship jobs overseas and instead incentivizing companies to keep jobs here? How do we provide research and development tax credits that are more generous and more permanent so they can plan the kinds of investments that will help grow jobs? But, you know, I know you have the same experience. You go to a manufacturer in your district and you're awed by the entrepreneurship and the commitment and the dedication of the workers there and the quality of the products they're producing. And all they're asking for us is give them a set of tools to level the playing field that help them succeed so they can sell their products to the rest of the world. And that should be a bipartisan effort. You know, making things and taking pride in making things in America should be something we all agree on, and I hope that we'll enjoy a lot of bipartisan support in making that a reality.
Well, it takes some public investment, and that's what I worry about, and I talk to our Republican colleagues about. My concern really is this national narrative that there isn't anything that the government could spend money on that would be a good thing.
Right.
It's all bad.
Right.
Any spending at all.
Right.
So that is a bad narrative to operate from when you're trying to say, hey, here's the public-private partnerships that we want to see, as I said in my opening. So the public-private partnership with NAMI in Youngstown, the Additive Manufacturing Institute, public-private partnership, a lot of companies, defense companies, companies like Siemens. So here's the investment in Youngstown. Now there's the building that was refurbished, was an old warehouse, and that's great in an old downtown. And now there's other businesses looking to locate. They say, well, we want to call and we want to be around the innovation that's happening there. So for an older industrial area, fantastic for us to have that opportunity. Then Siemens comes in, and Siemens donates $440 million worth of software to Youngstown State University to create that pipeline. And the goal really is, now you can see how just that little public investment is driving all of the private investment that's not just going to help our region, the tech belt from Cleveland to Pittsburgh to Akron and Youngstown, that whole region, but transform throughout the entire country. Everyone will benefit from this. So you begin to see that pipeline that you can create, and as you said, get on a track for manufacturing when you're in high school, so that when you're 18, you're not wandering around saying, you know, what car can I go buy and get myself into debt, or go to college for 1 year and accumulate debt and drop out because it's not your thing. We want kids to graduate from high school with the skill to be able to go out in the world and earn if they don't want to go to college. Get these 3D printers in the schools.
Right.
These kids are amazing. They'll learn it like that. And if you just, that's going to take some public investment.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, in my state, you know, we have in the cities of Woonsocket and Pawtucket and Central Falls and Providence, which all have mill buildings that were filled, you know, during a different time, you know, filled with good-paying jobs. And sort of we have to make adjustments to sort of what the demands are of the marketplace, what are the new technologies that are available like 3D printing, what are the skills that workers need, and what are the incentives we need to create to help those buildings be filled with manufacturing jobs of the 21st century. And you're right. It's going to require some public-private partnership, thoughtful, careful, efficient kinds of relationships, but a real public investment that will bring tremendous benefit not only to my state but to our country. And I too worry that, you know, there is a group of folks here in the Congress who believe we can't invest in anything that's important for our future. And as you mentioned, you know, our competitors are doing it, and they're doing it at a much faster pace. So if we're going to be successful, we need to seize this moment and build on the rich and wonderful manufacturing history of our country. And I think we'll see tremendous opportunities in my state, and I know in Ohio and all across this country. And I'm going to yield back and thank the gentleman.
I appreciate the gentleman being here, and I think, you know, see the states represented here, Rhode Island and Connecticut, in Massachusetts and Ohio and California, you know, and you could go on in the Michigan and Indiana and Wisconsin and all through New England and the Maine and New Hampshire, and it's just, we are a manufacturing country. Absolutely. We always have been. So I thank the gentleman.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Can I ask Mr. Speaker how much time we have remaining?
The gentleman has 19 minutes remaining.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to make a few comments slightly off topic for celebrating the Manufacturing Day, Recognition Day for tomorrow, and just explain to my constituents at home in a couple of minutes, because I don't want to take the entire time, but in a couple of minutes explain to my constituents at home my feelings and how I think things are playing out here in Washington, and I haven't had an opportunity to be home and want to communicate to them. My position here obviously is we need to get the government up and running. And we have a national discussion going on about the health care, the Affordable Care Act. I voted for the Affordable Care Act, support the Affordable Care Act. We're going to have its glitches as it rolls out, but I had, prior to a few years ago, as we were getting into the run-up of the Affordable Care Act, I had 1,700 families in 1 year go bankrupt because of health care costs. Numerous people losing their insurance. As we're talking about the next generation of manufacturing, it has been an ugly process in communities like ours of people losing their job and not having health insurance. 45, 50, 55, 60 years old, can't yet qualify for Medicare, are stuck, can't get any insurance. That was a problem. Health care costs going up dramatically. But what's happening here is we're now having a discussion from a smaller group in the Republican caucus of Tea Party members who are hell-bent on killing the Affordable Care Act and dismantling it. Now, here's the problem. They have every right as an American citizen and as an elected member of the United States Congress to have that opinion and to fight for that. Here's where I think there is a problem. We have an obligation here in this chamber to make sure that the government runs smoothly, gets funded. We're going to have our arguments as to where the investments are, what the tax code looks like, what are the trade agreements. These are all fights we have in this chamber. I'm not here to say that democracy is pretty. It's ugly. It's messy. There's a House of 435 members, a Senate of 100 members, a president, an executive branch. This is an ugly process. It's inherently ugly. As Churchill said, it's the worst form of government on the planet except for all the others. So we have an obligation to keep the government running. And so my argument, my complaint with what the Tea Party members are doing by saying, well, we'll extend what we call a continuing resolution, funding of the government. We will agree to extend it for 6 more weeks if you defund Obamacare or if you delay Obamacare. Now, as I said, they have every right to make that argument, and they have every right to have that belief. But a couple of points. We fund the government, and then through the normal process of governing, committee process, the struggle between the House and the Senate, the Republican House and the Democratic Senate and the Democratic President, we have that fight through the normal budgetary process. You do not shut down the government because you don't like a piece of legislation that passed the House, passed the Senate, was signed into law by the President of the United States, and the Supreme Court deemed it constitutional. You do not shut the government down because of that. You continue the government operating, and then you have this other fight. And guess what? Maybe you won't win the fight. I was here in 2003, 4, 5, 6. The Iraq War was going on. I was against the Iraq War. Had no interest in us going to Iraq. Campaigned against it in my first election. But when we got down here, we, through the political process, fought it. And we tried to end it. And then eventually, in 2006, Democrats won the House, won the Senate. We began the process of trying to continue to end the war in Iraq. We didn't do a very good job of it because President Bush was still in office. But President Bush had just won re-election in 2004. But we continued the fight. And my friends say the Affordable Care Act is not affordable and not popular. Guess what? The Iraq War was not affordable. The Iraq War was not popular. Well over 50% of Americans did not want us to be there at one point. But you just don't shut down the government because a policy has shifted in the country or the mood of the country has shifted on something. You have to work through the political process. So let's have that fight. And if you don't win it, if I was a Tea Party, I'd say, boy, this Obamacare is so bad, set it up and let it go. Wait till the American people see this. We're going to sweep them in 2014. We're going to win the presidency back in 2016. Why wouldn't you just let it go? If it's so bad, let it go. You'll win the House back. You could defund it. You could strip it down. You win the presidency. Start back over. We could go back to that old system where people were going bankrupt with their current health care plan, or getting kicked off, or not getting coverage for pre-existing condition. You have every right to do that. So let's get back to regular order. If Speaker Boehner brought a bill to the House floor today, right now, called all members, said we're having what we call a clean CR. We're just going to extend funding from current levels out for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever the number would be, and he brought it to the floor, it would pass. Democrats and Republicans. Senate would send their bill over, President would sign it, government would open back up, and we could go back to having our fights about the Affordable Care Act. And the Tea Party folks could talk about how bad it is, and we'll have examples of people that had benefited, and we'll move on. Now, the other problem I have is that we've already had this political fight. It doesn't stop us from having it again. Sometimes political fights take some time. So we just had this fight. Our friends on the other side call this Obamacare. And President Obama just won re-election. Clean sweep across the country. More Democrats in the Senate. In states like Indiana. Sherrod Brown won re-election in Ohio. President Obama won Ohio and a bunch of other key swing states. When the central issue was repeal Obamacare. So that battle was just fought. And to shut down the government in this process, I think, is improper. And here we have now all these other issues with the debt ceiling coming up and all of these other things. Let's have the fight. Win the political argument. Win the political battle. Take it back to the people in 2014 and 2016, if that's ultimately what you want to do. And as I said, you have every right to do that. This is a democracy. The political system will allow for it. And so I just want my constituents to know, you know, I don't think we should get into a position of necessarily picking what parts of the government should open and not open. I don't think that's a way. Open it up. And the other point is, the Democrats, for the number we want to open it up at, we wanted a much higher number. There's been too many cuts, in our estimation, for some of these essential programs that are long-term investments for our country. So we already compromised because our number was $1.058 trillion or something like that, and the Republican number was $986 billion. And we said, okay, well, the President said we'll take that number. So we already compromised. If you go out and want to buy a car and someone makes an offer for $10,000 and you say, no, I'll give you, I'll give you $9 for it, and they say, okay, we'll take it for $9, that was a compromise. And that's what happened here. But still, to be clear to my constituents, every bill that has come off this floor didn't just say we're going to extend funding for the government. It said we're going to extend funding for the government, and we want to repeal Obamacare, and we want to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we want to delay it for a year, the Affordable Care Act. That is an issue that has been argued. We can continue to do it, but let's do it through the normal political process. Let's get NIH back up and running, Center for Disease Control, food safety. All of these things can be funded with a total package, if Speaker Boehner brought a bill to the floor, a clean, continuing resolution that funded the government without any of this extraneous stuff, it would pass with Democrats and Republicans. The Senate would agree to it, the President would sign it, and the doors would open back up. So, lastly, let me say, because my friends have come up on the other side and say, well, we want to fund NIH because there's pediatric cancer patients there that need help. And I say, of course we want to do that. But we want every family in America to have insurance if their child gets cancer. We want every citizen to have access. And the Affordable Care Act has done that for millions and millions of people. It got rid of pre-existing conditions. It's taken the insurance companies out of the doctor-patient relationship. Before, if you were a child or you had cancer, you could hit your lifetime limit on your insurance policy, and then you were screwed. You couldn't get insurance because you hit your lifetime limit in just a year or two. The Affordable Care Act removed that cap, and it allows those investments to be made and allows that person to be able to get their health care. These are common sense things. So I wanted to communicate that to my constituents. Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you. We are here also to recognize National Manufacturing Day tomorrow. I want to thank Congressman Reed, who is the co-chair of the House Manufacturing Caucus, for his leadership on establishing more of these innovation centers, along with Congressman Kennedy and all of our speakers here tonight. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2013, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gohmert, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Always enjoy my friends on the other side of the aisle, some really terrific public speakers. I also enjoyed particularly the question from my friend across the aisle who said, why not let Obamacare just go through? And that is something that has been debated, and I've discussed with so many of my constituents. There are many people in the country that are so angry about Obamacare being passed. It's just hard to call it Affordable Care because I've heard so many that it is just devastated. So many who have told me that it's anything but affordable. It is devastating them. So some have said, if we just let Obamacare go through, it is going to hurt so many people. It's already hurt so many people. If we just let it go through, stand by, just get out of the way, let it hit, let it give the full hurt and damage that it will continue, that will just get worse with as it hurts the economy, as it continues to make most people's health care and health insurance both go up. And if you're a purely political animal, that is the perfect question to ask. Why not just let Obamacare go through and let it do its damage? But when you care deeply about people and you see the damage it's doing, how can you stand by and let it keep hurting the way it is? People have already lost insurance. They've already gotten their notices. We continue to get emails. We continue to get calls. I continue to hear from people I know and trust back home hear from other people around the country. And we've had, there's been an email where people could send us their stories, and then we try to verify. Obamacare at mail, mail.house.gov. So those stories continue to come in to Obamacare at mail.house.gov. And so if you're purely a political animal, whether Republican or Democrat, then it's a good question to ask, why not just let Obamacare come on through? Because if it is as bad as people are telling us it is, you see the damage to the economy, you see the people that have lost full-time work and gone to part-time work because of it, having to take multiple jobs, losing the benefits they had. You see businesses that had cultivated and trained employees who did not want to lose employees, who were building and building but got above the 50 threshold, and now they've had to cut back below that or go to part-time. You see the damage. And so, yes, for purely political animals, why not let it go through? Gee, as my friend noted, you know, if it's all that bad, you'll win the next election, the majority in the Senate next time, you'll win the presidency next time. But there are some of us that don't think in purely political terms. We hear from people. Our hearts break when their hearts break. We rejoice when they rejoice. And it's hard to feel good and stand by and let a train wreck or a nightmare, depending on which Democrat's description of Obamacare you want, just let it go and continue to wreak havoc on America and real American people and American lives. We've mentioned some of the stories before. Some, and as I say, they continue to come into Obamacare at mail.house.gov. Here's one from Jeff. I run a business in Tyler. We have part-time associates that work 35 hours per week on average, but this varies due to the changing business levels. We provide transportation services, moving freight to and from Tyler. Since the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, we've had to cut down hours of these associates to get below the employer mandated level of 30 hours. These associates are used to working 35 hours on average per week. As most Americans, they set their budget for their family around this many hours. Our company needs to be able to compete in this market, so we need the flexibility of the part-time worker. However, we must now cut hours of loyal, dedicated associates below 29 hours. This is creating a problem, first, for our associates who are simply trying to make ends meet, and for the organization that I run to provide quality service to our customers. This law is handcuffing the businesses and will ultimately drive up costs of running a company. When costs rise, they are passed along to the customers and on to the end consumer. We will continue to struggle economically under this law. Please do whatever you can to reverse this law and restore liberty to this country and our businesses. You got one from Tammy. When Obamacare first passed as law, I asked my OBGYN what he thought of it. His words were that it sucks. I told my husband that I bet when all this is said and done, he would retire, and guess what he did? So the part about being able to keep your doctor is definitely not true. Also, I own a small business with less than 50 employees, and we will never be able to grow our business any bigger than what it is right now. Sad. From Tammy. Mary said, we had insurance through Moen in my retirement package, which cost us $27 per month. It has been canceled effective January 1st of 2014. And comparable coverage is going to cost us $300 per month. We are on Social Security. It's from Walter and Mary in East Texas. Here's one from Harold. My granddaughter teaches elementary students in Mesquite. She was shocked to find that the health insurance she carries on herself and her son has doubled in cost since the school year. She inquired as to why, and well, you already know what the answer she was given: Obamacare. Single mom and her son. Here's another from a business owner. I've been told that my company offers what is known as a Cadillac health plan, although it's been years since anyone in my company could afford a Cadillac automobile. As a small business, I used the ability to offer health care that was superior to others to attract and retain quality long-time employees. Now faced with being taxed for providing too much of a good thing, I will reduce the benefits to my employees. We call that a left-handed handshake in Texas. It doesn't sit well with me. I'm sure not well with my employees. I'm considering early retirement and closing or selling my business altogether. It just doesn't seem to matter to anyone anymore that hard work and doing the right thing all these years ever counted for anything. Here's hoping some folks will pull their heads out of, well, before it's too late. I was part of Tenet's reduction in force on June 21st, 2013. With low hospital census and poor CMS reimbursement, my position was eliminated. I lost the family health care. I was paying $2,062 annually with a family deductible of $2,400 for our medical, dental, prescription, and eye insurance. For COBRA, Blue Cross, Blue Shield insurance, we will now have to pay $1,000 per month or $12,000 annually. My unemployment will not cover the cost of my insurance. That's from Claudia. I'm a firefighter with the city of White House, Texas. We've been able until October 1st, 2013 to work up to 39 hours a week because the city cannot afford to give us benefits. The city asked us if we could get on our spouse's group insurance. I could still work up to 39 hours a week with the new health care law. I joined my wife's group policy and went from paying $189 a month to $600 per month. We've been told as of October 1st, 2013, the Texas Municipal Insurance has interpreted the new health care law. Anyone working over 30 hours a week has to be provided health benefits. We're now going to be cut back to working 24 hours a week and not get health care. I've left my wife's plan and went back to my own insurance policy. But with the cuts in hours, I cannot afford to stay on her plan and will have a hard time paying for my own. I cannot understand if the new health plan is going to get health insurance for everyone and I already have insurance. Why can't I be left alone to work the 39 hours a week? At $13 an hour, 24 hours a week doesn't bring in much for the job we're expected to do. And at 61 years of age, jobs are kind of scarce. I can't understand why my country is trying to put me on welfare. We have too many on it already. All I want to do is work. From John. Here's one from Kerry. I've been in law enforcement since I was 21, and what's happening to our officers, dispatchers, and deputies today is disgusting. Many rural counties, like mine, where I'm from, have voted in county commissioners court and actually passed that because of Obamacare, the deputies will have to pay for their own medical insurance. These officers are already being paid below what surrounding counties are being paid. Now they're going to have to spend over half of their income on their own insurance because the county cannot afford to pay it. Let me break this down for you. A good friend of mine is employed as a deputy by the same county sheriff's office and makes about $900 every 2 weeks, and $400 to $450 of that will now go towards medical insurance. This deputy was almost killed in the line of duty 2 years ago, resulting in a lot of surgeries and a year of hospitalization and rehabilitation as well. Because of all of those line of duty injuries, he may not be able to get private coverage now. How can you ask a man or woman to lay their life on the line every day to serve the public and enforce laws, but then tell them that they'll go from spending about $150 a month on insurance premiums to about $450 per month? And it's true that you should be able to go to the exchanges, and if you can ever get through and someday get it, it's not going to have the coverage that they had before. They've lost their insurance. They won't have insurance like that again. It won't be the coverage that they wanted, that they selected, that they'd agreed on. Why? Because if you like your insurance, Obamacare makes sure you're not likely to keep it. It's the bottom line. Here's one from Ima. Due to Obamacare, I received a letter from my doctor 2 weeks ago telling me she would no longer take care of anyone on Medicare. There's a big shortage of doctors that will accept Medicare patients in such a small town as Lufkin. I haven't been able to get another doctor to accept me as of this date. I never thought I would live to experience my own government treating us like we were a communist nation. Our Congress has truly let the American people down. I'm sure Ima remembers being told repeatedly by everyone from the President, so many of our Democratic colleagues here, that if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Well, Ima lost her doctor like so many across America. Here's one from Jay, East Texas. My son returned from a tour in Iraq to an economy that hindered his job search for over a year. He finally got a job with Fastenal as a part-time warehouse worker. As a part-timer, he was able to work 39 hours every week, which paid his bills and allowed him to put aside some savings for pilot training. Thanks to Obamacare, his hours have been cut to 29. He has had to move out of his apartment and into a communal house so he can afford to live. Thankfully, he has VA health benefits. Otherwise, he would have to pay for health benefits or a fine out of his greatly reduced income. This is from Jim. My son has a learning disability, yet he has worked faithfully for a nationwide paint company for over 3 years. He is married. He and his wife work hard, refuse to go on welfare, have their dignity, life vision, and a committed work ethic. Yet the best position he had attained was part-time at the paint company. He was working 32 hours per week, and they were paying their bills, but living basically at the poverty line. Then Obamacare came. And like so many companies, my son's hours reduced to 28 hours per week. This put him below the poverty line and made it impossible to meet all his bills. He refused to pursue welfare because he has a commitment to earn what he receives. Obamacare punished diligent, community-responsible Americans like my son. How many other working poor have been similarly hurt because of a program that was put in place with such irresponsible legislative leadership? If someone wonders what James is talking about regarding irresponsible legislative leadership, that came through a legislative process without any input from Republicans who represented nearly half of the country. So nearly half of the country didn't get any input into Obamacare. We were told it would be negotiated on C-SPAN by the president while he was running. Not only was it not negotiated on C-SPAN, the legislative leaders in this room, in this body, who pushed it through without most of the people that voted for it having any idea of what was in it. I read it. That's why I was so committed to voting against it and to trying to get others to understand what they were going to do to America. So this young man who had known the pride of being self-supporting with a disability, providing for his family just above the poverty line, and Obamacare shoved him into poverty. Here's one from Michelle with 2 L's. It's not my friend Michelle Bachmann. This is from a Texas Michelle. During this process, and even before Obamacare actually goes into full effect, see, she sent this last week. Every single member of my family has been affected. Both of my children, who've always maintained full-time jobs and supported their families, are now faced with part-time employment from multiple jobs because their employers can't afford to provide health insurance any longer, and as such, their hours have been reduced to avoid having to provide health insurance. That means my children, my grandchildren, are all going to be forced into the exchanges, which are not affordable at all, despite the empty promises made by the Democratic Party when this horrible bill was passed. In fact, please tell our former speaker that now that everyone has had a chance to read it, it's even more obvious that this plan does not work. On my side, I've always maintained health insurance, but since the passage of Obamacare, my health premiums have increased over 316%. In addition, my deductibles have skyrocketed by 500%, and the covered services have been reduced. So thank you for allowing me to keep my health care coverage if I chose to. You didn't mention that it would now be unaffordable. Here's one from Leland. A dark age in medicine. That was the phrase my oncologist at a recent office visit used. He said, when you cut reimbursements as low as Medicare and Obamacare have done, the number of patients I must see to cover the fixed costs of my practice severely impacts the time I can spend with a single patient. Quality of care can't help but be impacted. Well, Leland has an oncologist. I hope and pray that his cancer is in remission. It was amazing to hear Democrats say, hey, yeah, okay, maybe we did cut Medicare in Obamacare by over $700 billion. Not sure if I hear them talk about the amount that they devastated Medicare. Hey, but that only goes to the providers. It does not affect and will not affect your care. Well, as you can find out from Leland, it does affect their care. And when doctors, as we've heard from other people across the country, when you cut so dramatically the reimbursement that a health care provider gets for providing health care service, either they're going to have to stop providing that service or they cannot provide the same level or quality of service. Seniors across America are one by one figuring that out. Wow, wait a minute. You were so sold on this Obamacare bill, you called it affordable, and yet you told me I wasn't going to be affected as a senior citizen in America when you cut hundreds of billions of dollars out from the services I was going to get. They're figuring it out. Their service has been affected and will get worse and worse as time goes on. Because that's what the government does. When the government takes over something, it's rare that it gets better. Here we've got one from Nick. The American Veterinary Medical Association has decided, because of the uncertainties of Obamacare, to discontinue its sponsorship of its group major medical policy effective December 1st, 2013. Not only has my wife and I had this insurance since she graduated from vet school in 1976, my dad also had it when he graduated from vet school in 1952. So now at the age of 61, we're looking for new insurance. I'm sure Nick recalls the promise, if you like your insurance, oh, you can keep it. Here's an email from Debbie. I'm responding by letting you know that I've lost my health care insurance, terminating at the end of this year due to Obamacare. Of course, we have her name and information. One from Tom. My doctor retired as a result of Obamacare. And that's somebody that served in the Army. Here's one from Emily. We had group insurance with my husband's work, a plan that covered our family that cost $568 a month, no copay, $1,200 deductible per person, has now increased to $1,100 per month and $4,800 deductible per person to stay current with new health care laws. That's more than our house payment. Once upon a time, a mother whose husband worked was able to stay home. Now either both have to work to afford things like insurance, or neither work so we can bum off the people that do. And her subject line was unaffordable rather than affordable. But her insurance went from $568 a month, which is a pretty healthy price there, basically doubling to $1,100 per month, and the no copay deductible went from $1,200 per person to $4,800 per person. That's enough to devastate a family. Here's one from James. Several months ago, we got a letter in the mail saying that our physician, I won't give the name, was leaving her affiliated practice. When we asked her about it, she listed Obamacare as the primary reason for leaving the practice. Here's one from Ty. I just received my affordable health care renewal notice from my health care insurance provider, which is one of the 2 members participating in North Carolina's Marketplace Exchange. I've been informed that the plan which I currently have and like will no longer be available under Obamacare. As a result, I'm being forced to switch to a new plan. Additionally, effective January 1st, 2014, the premium for an insurance plan comparable to my current is increasing from $235 to $407 per month, and my maximum out-of-pocket expense is increasing from $2,700 to $6,350. He goes on to complain about hearing the president say on numerous occasions, if you like your insurance, you can keep it. Here's one from Carmine. I am a responsible family man. I've always provided health insurance for my family. In 2008, I was diagnosed with MS, making insurance expensive. However, I always made do by having insurance either on my wife's plan or my own plan. In 2009, we lost my wife's plan, and we worried because of my pre-existing condition. However, we learned that our state of New Jersey had a provision that we cannot be denied coverage as long as we can prove we had coverage at the time I was diagnosed. I also find out that in our state, New Jersey, dependents can stay on their parents' plan up until they are 31 years old. So 2 of Obama's biggest benefits were already available in my state. However, after being extremely responsible in this tough economic time, the Obamacare law has now made my insurance policy non-renewable. My wife worked really hard to make sure that I and our child are covered under this plan, and now we will lose it. We do not know if these plans, which could be a little cheaper, will provide the coverage I need. I have a specific doctor I see at St. Sinai. Because the liberal Democrats want to cover the uninsured, a noble thing, they are hurting those who always try to be responsible. Carmine in New Jersey. And it is worth noting, Mr. Speaker, that back during the Obamacare debates, there were many of us Republicans that were saying to our Democratic friends, they controlled the White House, they controlled the House, they controlled the Senate, said, look, why don't we do a bipartisan group of bills or one bill? We can agree on a bill that allows people to keep their kids on their insurance if they're dependents, or we can work something out here. And we were told we weren't needed because they controlled the White House, the Senate, the House of Representatives. They didn't need our input. And they rammed through a bill without knowing what all was in it. I know of cases, I've heard of cases where people had acknowledged conditions, insurance companies said we know, and then later got dropped for having, after they got expensive, oh, you had a pre-existing condition. There have been things that were very unfair that insurance companies have done, and there are ways to deal with those things, and when they're not, we should fix it with legislation. But what the Democratic Party did without most people who voted for the Obamacare bill, knowing what was in it, they passed a law that had not been properly vetted or thought through. There was no chance to fuss about amendments at the subcommittee, at the committee, or here on the floor, because the bill that was dealt with in the committee, it wasn't the same one that they rushed through as the final Obamacare. I read the 1,000-page bill. I read their 2,000-page bill when it looked like that was what they were going to vote on here. And then it turned out, here came the other. So I was slow to make my way through that bill. I really didn't want to. What if they come back with a 5,000-page bill after that? Well, when it turned out that's what they were really going to do, I went through that. I wasn't able to go through and take the sections in each place that were talked about in other bills, other laws. So it's almost impossible unless you have a tremendous amount of time to go back and figure out how it actually affects other laws. But when you read through it, you get an awful lot of gist of what's happening. And it sure wasn't something we should have passed. Karen from Vermont, actually, said, shortly following passage of Obamacare, I lost my primary care doctor. He decided to join a group that limited the number of patients that he could treat and that charged a yearly fee not covered by Medicare for the privilege of remaining his patient. This resulted in hundreds of patients being dropped. She says, from Vermont, put an end to Obamacare. She lost her doctor. She didn't get to keep him or her. Here's one from D. My insurance deductible was raised to $4,000 as of September 1st, 2013 per individual, $8,000 per family. She goes on to describe all the other things that jumped up as a result. Here's one from Erica. As a single disabled mom to one disabled son, I'm on Medicare and Medicaid. Just got my new policy for 2014. Half of the insurance I had is gone because of, well, I can't read that here, Mr. Speaker, but Erica describes the bill in such a way that I can't read it on the floor. Anyway, she says, I was able to join a gym on a discount to keep me active, but no longer can do that. My price increases for my prescription drugs. Please repeal this bill and listen to the American people. Here's one from Helen. As a glass artist, and Obama's hold on our economy has ruined my business. My target market is middle class, stay-at-home moms, but almost all my customer base has shifted to those owning $500,000 homes. I know because I check every time I make a sale. This makes me very sad and even mad that only wealthy can afford my art now. Should have gone into gun sales, which don't discriminate. Obamacare has forced my family to lose our Blue Cross from my husband's work because he cannot afford us anymore. We're almost old enough to go on Medicare, but I hear it's been raided by Obamacare, which we refuse to participate in. We're not Obama's slaves. Well, I'm not going to read the rest of that, but Helen obviously is rather bitter because they liked their insurance, but the promises were broken. She didn't keep her insurance, she and her family. So I want to go back to the question my friend was asking. That's only a portion of the stacks of emails we've been getting. Why not let Obamacare just go through? Well, like I say, if you're a pure political animal, yeah, let it go through. Let Americans like these poor folks, let them keep suffering. And, ooh, it'll be so good. Republicans will win back the majority in the Senate, and we're told, oh, gee, they'll win the White House in 2016. Well, it just happens that to some of us, doing the right thing in Congress is not about helping a political party. It's about trying to help the people that elected us. It's about trying to do what's right for the whole country. And if your heart doesn't break when you read these stories and when you take the phone calls and when you have people tell you with broken hearts of what's happened to their business, what's happened to their job, what's happened to their family, what's happened to their kids' jobs, and the suffering that's going on, why? Yeah, if you're enough of a political animal like some folks, I guess, yeah, okay, maybe it'd be great for the Republican Party if we just sat back and let it go through, let it devastate everybody you can. My mother, my late mother, used to tell me she wished I'd be a doctor. She used to have Dr. McKellar, who passed away this year. I think she's the one that kept encouraging me, but he would tell me, Louis, you'd be a great doctor. I'll help you. You'd be great. We can get you into Baylor Medical School. You know, a great medical school. But it just didn't feel like what I was being called to do. It didn't feel right in my heart. But when I think about the suffering that is going on, I know that I'm in a place to make a difference. And we, every one of us here in this body, are here where we can make a difference, where we can help people see the doctor that they should see. So the question has come from different constituents, from other people, gee, you know, all federal workers, now some think that Congress has a different health care plan than all federal workers, but it's all part of the same federal plan that every federal worker has, and you've got choices you can make. But some people have asked a question I don't have a really good answer for, but they've said if the Democrats were so insistent, if the real purpose of Obamacare was to try to make sure people that didn't have insurance got insurance, and they really intended to make sure that if you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance, and if they were really serious that if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, then why didn't they just figure out a way that if you don't have insurance, you know, you can choose from state's cafeteria plan or federal employees plan in their states, you know, do something like that. I don't have a good answer. Other than when you look and you go through Obamacare, it is very clear, as we've said before, it wasn't just about health care. It was about the GRE, the government running everything. The government getting all of your most personal, private information, having every one of your medical records in the federal possession. It's a disaster. Well, I have reflected on Franklin Roosevelt's speech. I admired the speech he gave in this room from that podium when it was white marble. that this is a day that will live in infamy. He gave another speech when he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. It's considered one of the greatest speeches by anybody. Yet our president was on CNBC yesterday he said, quote, "If we get into the habit where one party is allowed to extort, then any president who comes after me would be unable to govern effectively." That's rather interesting. It's a little different from the approach that Bill Clinton took back in the 1990s, because President Clinton, back during the shutdown, the few weeks that was going on, talked to the Speaker of the House virtually every day. There may have been 1 or 2 days they didn't talk, but otherwise basically talking every day. And you had an interviewer asking the president about, gee, Wall Street doesn't seem to have, seemed to be pretty calm. And the president, instead of saying, that's a great thing, everybody should remain calm, we're going to work this thing out, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, instead sounded like more of a fire alarm. Gee, they better be concerned. He wanted Wall Street to be concerned, to be worried, because when Wall Street gets worried, then it means people that have invested in the market, that have their life savings, retirement savings in the market, it means they lose money. And yet that's what was suggested. Get worried, get concerned. Here's an article from Penny Star from yesterday afternoon late.